Hi everybody, my name is David Thompson. Apart from being a work-at-home dad these days, I'm an AR/VR evangelist, both at my work at a company called Aviva, and I'm also a member of the board of advisors for the VR/AR Association here in Germany. Um, so something that's kind of going on just now is obviously an increased interest in VR, specifically in this case, or mostly VR, for events, virtual meetings, virtual events, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, where everybody's kind of locked down, or a large proportion of the world is in lockdown. So through my contacts in the VR AR Association, I joined a group last Friday. So it's the 29th of March, just now, last Friday, who were looking at testing applications and platforms for events and meetings. And this is something that I've been trying to do with my limited group of friends who have VR hardware. But suddenly, of course, now there's a huge interest in this. So I was very happy to be part of this group. It's a WhatsApp group called XR Crowd Embrace Online XR. And I think the original point of this group getting together was to drive XR industry, off online events. So basically, to reduce the carbon footprint of the events industry. So the events industry, which I'm very much involved in through my work at Aviva, is not particularly sustainable. So flying huge amounts of people around the world to conferences, staying in big hotels, and events are, it's a stunning amount of money that is spent on events, but they're a very important part of business today. So it kind of came as no surprise that this group has suddenly got a lot of attention. So as far as I can tell, this group was really just trying to reduce carbon footprint through driving adoption of virtual events, but now it's kind of taken in people from the events industry to give them also the opportunity to look at some of the platforms that are out there to run virtual events. So as I said, I joined last Friday morning, and then by Friday evening, there's a kind of registration document you sign up for, and then you find out about the virtual events that we're going to attend effectively that evening to test the platforms. So as far as I know, we always start in a sort of desktop mode platform to have a kind of meeting to discuss the minutes or the findings from last week, and then we go into the platforms just to do a little bit of informal testing. So last week was very good. We did Verbella, as you can see here. It's an avatar based kind of virtual world for events. I think it's based on, it was actually originally made for MBA students to have some way of getting together. It's like a campus. We then tested AltspaceVR and Engage VR. So that's the three tools that I'll talk about in this episode, if you like, of my reviews of this event that's going on. So Verbella was very interesting. I'd never heard of it before. In some ways, I guess a little bit like Second Life. You have an avatar, you can customize the avatar. As you can see here, you can move around virtual worlds, which obviously somebody's built. And this is not recording from last week. This is just a recording I made this morning. But basically, last week we went to the auditorium and we got a kind of lecture theatre presentation from some of the founders of this group in this room, actually. And as you can see here, the platform supports streaming of web content very well. We had many users in this room at the same time. And I think it's kind of quite interesting to have an avatar. I'm not completely convinced about having an avatar, when you're on your desktop anyway. But as you can see here, you can sit down. There were some nice things like the ability to have a breakout room or table, actually. And when you sat on that table, you had, private sound just for your group. So what it means is it is an environment where you could facilitate workshops, where you can basically have a virtual event. So have breakout areas, have the main plenary, have an exhibition area, as far as I can tell. So from that point of view, it had a lot of potential. The next application that we tested, which was mostly for VR users, was AltSpace. This is something, again, it's freely available from their website. It runs on pretty much every computing platform. And as you can see here, nice colorful 3D environments. This is me running it in desktop mode just to show you that you can run it in desktop mode. There's a lot of rich functionality in this application. It's a social, a social platform actually. You can watch videos together. You can look at web content together. So the key difference here between a Zoom meeting or anything else is that you have a virtual world, which means you have avatars. That's mine, as you can see there, which means you can have multiple people sharing an experience together, whether that be looking at a gaming video or looking at a website, as you can see here, or attending a virtual event, which I'll show you what that looks like if I just fast forward here. So very different from tools like video conferencing tools like Zoom Meeting, because you can do these things with other people. So you can look at a single piece of content with other people and have that conversation. And I think it's these kind of meetups, so let me pause again, as you saw there, where you're amongst other people, that's one of the real unique abilities of VR. So this is actually recording from last week's session. I jumped into the wrong session, but it was a very interesting session about this Educators in VR conference, which is one of the first major conferences that's been held in VR. And this was actually a presentation about the findings or what's needed behind the scenes to run these kind of events. I'll just run this for a couple of seconds for you.
Speakers with all of your different support team. I cannot tell you, Discord, awesome!
So Discord is awesome. And yeah, so just to put this in context, this is a recording from my Oculus Quest device. It's why the format's a bit small. It's effectively 1/2 of the screen that I see. I see a stereo version of this. And of course the resolution is doing some foveated rendering, so the center is clear, the outside is fuzzy. That's why it looks like that. But this is the best I can do to record from a mobile device, a live recording of what I was seeing. So as you can see here, this is plenary or keynote session. I could read this screen very well as long as the text was big enough. Everybody's muted, so the speaker has a chance to speak properly, and the platform has all the tools you need to do this kind of thing. So you can allow people to raise their hands. You can unmute them one at a time to allow them to ask a question. I think the only thing that people really found that it's not very easy to take notes once you're in VR. And of course, getting presentation onto this platform requires it to be on the web in one form or another. We then went into this kind of breakout session. Actually, this was us meeting up. Now I'm in the right room for this XR crowd. And I'll just play this without my commentary for a minute or so you can see what it's like to when people are congregating in a breakout area effectively and getting to meet each other again.
So much going on here. Hello. So much going on. Yeah. Okay. Yes. It's Ollie. Yeah. Nice to meet you too. So yeah. Hello. Shake hands. I'm Antonio from Italy. We met in Padua last year. Yeah, I remember. So yeah, I was just telling them about what we do. So hey, and stuff. What's that? In VR. Toby, what's your name?
This is Toby?
Yeah, I'm Victor. This is Toby. Victor. Hi, Victor Palomino.
Hi, Toby.
No, I don't see your name.
So I really like this conversation these two guys are having here. You see, how the hand movement, a little bit of head movement really helps to understand the conversation. It just really helps us to communicate. The other thing I love about this scene is that there's a kind of you can really feel the energy as people come into this room. Everybody's talking. You've got that kind of buzz like you have when you go into a breakout area or an exhibition area from a real conference. And but you also have the same kind of social awkwardness. So there are the wallflowers who were up in this ramp here. I was personally actually looking for my friend from the VR AR Association, Phil, I had to click on people to see the names because I didn't recognize his avatar. But this is something, again, as far as I know, it's not possible in a Zoom meeting in any way or form. So I find this very interesting, just that kind of getting to meet people who are complete strangers. You can, hang around next to a conversation and join in whenever you want to. This is very hard to do on video conferencing tools. So I think that's a very good example again of the power of VR for specifically for kind of breakout sessions, getting to know people. So this this next platform, as you can see here, more realistic environments, more realistic avatars. This is Engage VR. It's an application originally developed for educational purposes, but it's finding its feet really for these kind of virtual events. And it was actually part of that Educators in VR conference, as was AltspaceVR. And I'll just play this again without my commentary for the first few seconds here.
Hey, Tim.
Hi, Richard. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. So if you just if you look on your hand, you've got the teleport button. If you point at a chair, it'll actually allow you to sit in a chair.
All right, let's see. I'm gonna go and sit next to Ulrich.
Hey, Tim.
How are you?
Give hands.
Nice to see you.
That's really funny, right?
By the way, where's the...
So I love this moment I captured here. It's another great example of the kind of things that are just not possible in a video conferencing tool. So these are three people I think who know each other. This is it's Richard Ward from McKinsey & Company, who's our kind of host and moderator here. Tim has come in, found himself, kind of at the front of this auditorium. Richard guides him through, some basic instructions. Tim takes a seat next to maybe a friend, somebody he knows, I think. And it's your natural instinct to go out and reach your hand out to greet somebody, something that you can't do in a video conferencing tool. We were then told by Richard that, we should do a fist bump because you get a haptic feedback. So we all spent, a few minutes trying to figure out the controls for a fist bump. But something I found very interesting about this tool, if I play a little bit further here, is that I noticed that up the back here, there's actually somebody in the backstage room who was doing some production. So I take a virtual walk. Bear in mind I was in my home office this whole time. You can't hear my voice on this video.
How's it going, David?
But Steve there could. You can see him on his virtual iPad where he can control the content that appears on the screen. And you can see here the kind of controls.
Hey, how's everything?
The controls that he has there for the curtains, to bring the projection screen down, a variety of different things. So I thought that's a really cool feature that you can, have a crew of people who can help you do your production more professionally, which is the same with real life. I then went down and...
The fact that it kind of really made very clear that...
Yeah, so Richard's
that
going to talk about
the benefit of VR. You need to make your shows more like Cirque du Soleil and less like the evening news on television, right? And that it's, not just images and a talking head. It has to actually be, something a bit more engaging. And so that's one of the parts that I think is a learning for me from that whole thing.
So, so Richard's making a very important part here. So just before this was recorded last week, there was an event from HTC Vive, one of the headset makers, who held their developer conference in the Engage platform. I wasn't able to make it. It was 1 a.m. because it was in Chinese time. But I think Richard attended, and one of the things that they did, you'll be able to find this video somewhere on YouTube, is that they really made a spectacular show in this platform. So they had planes flying across to open up the event. They did a very good trick. So there's a famous video of, I think, one of the first moving pictures, and it's a train just coming along a platform. And the story goes that the people in the theater watching this for the first time, all kind of ran out the way because they thought this train was going to come out the screen and run them over, which of course it didn't because it was a film. So in the HTC Vive event, or the HTC event, they actually did the same thing where there was that actual footage of this train coming along the platform, but a 3D version of the train, burst through the screen onto the stage, to give everybody that same kind of shock effect. So that's the kind of thing that's possible in a VR event. Again, impossible to do in a Zoom meeting or a Skype meeting or a Teams or whatever your tool is. So Rich is making the point here that, if you're presenting something on Zoom, you might as well make it like the 9 o'clock news, or a television show. But when you're presenting something in VR, you can use the stage. So you can move around the stage, you can draw people's attention from the left and the right of the stage, and you can use much more of that that kind of storytelling ability that we have as humans. So this, for me, is a really important learning from that session. So thank you very much for that, Richard. You see me nodding my head there. I'll skip through this in the interest of making this video kind of shorter. So you can see here we're all muted. So this is Steve at the backstage who's muting us here because there was background noise or whatever reason. But that's the kind of tools you need to make these kind of things work. But then a very special thing happened. So actually they took us from this environment into another environment. So Richard had explained that the goal of this session in Engage was to show you what it's like to do a keynote presentation, what it's like to be in a conference hall, how to use, I think it was 3D props, and then to be in a more of a cocktail kind of breakout sociable environment. So we go into the dark here, and I'll let this play for a couple of seconds. It's effectively loading, that 3D environment onto my device.
I think we all need to kind of tilt into chairs. So again, point to the chair.
So you can see there, we were playing musical chairs because there weren't enough chairs.
Here, if the benefit again of VR versus doing kind of like normal WebExing or television type things is the left and the right.
So again, Richard making the point that the left and the right is the benefit. So this ability to draw your attention around, you're not stuck to a single frame. So we're all going to be completely sick of sitting in front of our screens, I think, after this lockdown. But in VR, you can move around. So very important thing is when you're having a conversation, or let's say like this, it's a boardroom kind of environment, maybe 4 people sitting in front of you, 3 to the right. As soon as somebody speaks, because you have spatial audio and you can see their body language, your attention is immediately drawn to them. So you will look at them in a very natural way. And I think this is, my experience in other applications is that I can actually have quite long but very high quality and very high quality conversations in VR with people about pretty deep topics. So Richard makes the point here that obviously this could be a boardroom where it's people literally having a that sort of 8-way conversation perhaps, or this environment could be used, and this is kind of an innovation where you've got a panel on one side of the table. So let's say they're COVID-19 experts, and on the other side of the table you could have the general public, obviously muted. But then, being able to observe this panel discussion in a very intimate way, literally sitting, opposite these virtual, these avatars of real people real experts having a discussion, would be very powerful. And moreover, Richard made the point that you could effectively, I think it's called sharding. So you could basically replicate this room hundreds of times and have a large number of audience members being able to have that very intimate viewing of a panel discussion like that. So I think that's a very interesting use case.
Imagine that this particular group, 50% of you are experts on Corona.
Yeah, so you can see there was some audio issues. The Steve, the producing, the guy in the backstage here has muted everybody. So there were issues like that around audio. Some people were using laptops and there was a feedback loop. We get this in Zoom meetings as well, to be fair. We then moved to another room. So that was the left and the right, me looking at the speaker, then Richard. We moved to a very interesting room, which I'm going to skip through here, where, as you'll see, I'll just let it play for a second.
Was my first. Oh, it's very right.
So as you can see, there's one of the big benefits. You can bring in here animated 3D models. So this is obviously something that is a real help in communicating a story or a point of view in certain cases. Requires, of course, additional preparation to make these models. But this is something that I think is going to be extremely powerful about events in VR, that you can bring in in the industry that I work in, which is heavy industry, you could bring in, a construction simulation for a factory or for a medical facility. You could bring in, molecular kind of model of, some kind of new vaccine that you're trying to produce. So just kind of like the sci-fi movies that we're used to, you can bring in this kind of content. It's not holographic, it's virtual in this case. And use that to help make your point. So I think that's an extremely powerful part of VR. And you'll see here that, even in this tool, again, running on a mobile device, I'm able to manipulate this, make it smaller, scale it up and down.
There's birds and these,
and you can see we all had a lot of fun, interacting with this
bear. If we were to have an active conversation, not only could we have PowerPoint.
We then, just to wrap up, we then went into a sort of more sociable area. Here you can see it's a kind of
This looks so cool.
people kind of relaxing a little bit.
So the final lesson that we
and
had
this
from all
was
this,
to show that you can have a breakout area in an unusual
so the
environment.
other piece that
People
we
can
learned
go
from
off and have private
we need these kind of
conversations,
cocktail party social spaces.
fun things to
And
do.
one of the lessons from them was,
that's the whole
is you
point of
need
this
things
final
people
one.
can play with.
So I'd just like to kind of end this video by saying that this of course was a little bit chaotic trying to get this many people organized. Nobody's let's say linked up within these platforms, so we had to kind of arrange everything by WhatsApp. But the main thing is I actually left this kind of 2-hour experience or 2.5-hour experience feeling, first of all, like I'd been to a real event, and second of all, actually feeling like I knew some of these people. Excuse me. So that was a really important takeaway for me. And the most important thing, I think, is that it's very clear that people need to practice and gain, learn the best practices, learn how to use these platforms. And in our WhatsApp group, we're discussing what worked, what didn't work. For example, we'd all like the ability just to have a URL and say, here's the event that I've created, here's the URL, just like a Zoom meeting, share it to everybody in the WhatsApp, and then everybody being able to jump, from their phone, into their headset to attend these devices. Instead, we have to go into an application, look for a meeting or an event, and that kind of took a lot of time. But it's very important, to test these platforms to figure out what works and what doesn't work. So if you're organizing a virtual event, hopefully this will give you a little bit of an insight into what's possible today and some of the platforms. And we will be testing other platforms, which I'll do my best to make videos of on the weekend like this. But I hope it inspires you. I hope it opens your eyes to what's possible today. Of course, we are wearing headset. It's not always comfortable. I'll be first to admit that. But I think when we're kind of stuck at home like we are these days, this is just something that could help us, as a species to communicate, to continue life as normal as possible in these circumstances. So I'm going to leave it there for now. I hope you enjoyed the video and look forward to your comments, and watch this space for the next one. Bye bye.